Over 200 people are still missing despite a challenging 5-day search operation that has now gone into its 6th day, being conducted by various authorities, including more than 2,000 individuals, volunteers, Army, SDRF and NDRF personnel on the spot in the hilltops of Wayanad. The death toll is now at 355. 4 more bodies have been recovered in the scope of the past 24 hours. And that, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, also includes unidentifiable body parts. Some of the recoveries of the human remains are taking place in downstream areas, several hundred meters away from where the landslides indeed took place. The Indian Air Force has been conducting not only recce operations but radar operations, and radars have been brought in from Siachen and Delhi to hasten the process to aid and abet the search operation. The rescue operation, of course, on your screens has already now concluded. Authorities on the ground are requesting people who for some bizarre reason have shown up to take up selfies that this is not the time for disaster tourism. Let me open up this conversation on what the immediate priorities are, because I'm being told that the state government is also now coming up with a rehabilitation plan for those people who literally have lost their homes and have lost loved ones. Dr. PSV Rao is joining us on the broadcast. Jayajit Bhattacharya is with us, and Chinmaya Srivastava joining us on the broadcast as well. Chinmaya, as you see it, as we head into the 6th day, what are the priorities?
So, firstly, to ensure that the evacuation operations will be in full pace, and Kerala has been experiencing these landslides repeatedly for the past consecutive years. So in 2018, they experienced this, in 2019 again, then 2020, there was a landslide. So instead of just reacting to these situations and events when they happen, there should be some state level policies on how to use lands. There should be different types of contour farming that should be promoted to ensure these soil erosion is contained to a large extent. So there should be some government related initiatives and some educational campaigns also to not just address the current problem, but to address this in the longer term.
Okay, long-term challenges, short-term challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, the likelihood of finding anyone alive now at this stage is near nil. So this is a recovery operation, not a rescue operation anymore. But quintessentially, the operation also has to take a turn to reopen access. That one Bailey bridge is helping, but the hilltops are still cut off. We are talking about 40 feet deep mud. That, if you do the quick back of the envelope calculation, is telling you that there are potentially tens of thousands of tons of earth which will have to be removed. And in an active situation where the soil is already loose, it's wet. Today I'm being told by my colleague there on the ground that there hasn't been significant rainfall since morning, but that can change. Heavy lifting machinery, landslide moving machinery, which we are constantly showcasing on our screens for the past 3 days, is of course the need of the hour to get things back on track in the tragic circumstance such as it is. Dr. Rao, now here we are. Barring miracles, sir, finding someone alive now of the 250 people missing seems unlikely. What do you think? Could somebody have survived now 5 or 6 days?
The only way someone would have survived is if a building has been covered up and there is enough air and protection inside a hollow in that building. But if someone has been completely covered with mud, they would have suffocated to death long ago. And the load of so much of wet mud, you can imagine how heavy it will be. It would have crushed and suffocated long back. So buildings are, many of these buildings are in river valleys, they are in low-lying areas, and they have been covered. And as you said, 40 feet is like 4-storied building. And anyone who is involved with agriculture, horticulture would know how heavy wet mud is. It is not dry mud, it is wet mud. It is very, very heavy and very suffocating. So the hope is, one never gives up hope, but still the chances are very little of anyone surviving this. And as a doctor, we always say, prevention is better than cure.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the prospects of the recovery of the 250 missing individuals now wane. As I mentioned, 4 bodies have been recovered. We'll have to now face the tragic prospect that there might be some human remains that are in fact never recovered. And as the days pass, with a death toll currently at 355 with 250 people missing, you are now looking at an eventuality of between 600 to 700 people, making this one of India's worst natural calamities. There have been much worse. I remember the earthquake in Bhuj took, 20,000 lives, with more than 1 lakh people who were displaced. So we've had worse natural disasters, but this is in recent memory the worst. Now, Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya, as we see it, sir, we have to now start focusing on the survivors. We have to rebuild the infrastructure, but what can be done in the immediate term to give people a sense of return to livelihood?
Right. In fact, in terms of the survivors, it's not just those who are buried under the mud. There are many who are stranded.
Yeah.
So we need to ensure that the collateral, damages are limited. So those who have survived in terms of life, they should also survive in terms of their livelihood, rebuild their lives and move on. Also, there'll be a bunch of people still stranded somewhere in that mayhem that has happened. And we need to make sure that we are able to identify them, get them to a safe place and rebuild their lives. Now, rebuilding their lives includes multiple things. One, obviously, the livelihood. Second, also getting their livelihood assets back. So just providing a Manrega is not a good enough solution. These are people who are involved in tourism. These are people who are involved in livestock, in agriculture, and so on and so forth. So we need to get their implements back. Now, unfortunately, what happens in these circumstances is that even if the government gives a remuneration based on the loss that has happened, it is very difficult to ascertain the loss. So how many chickens have been lost, how much of farm has been lost, how many cattle has been lost, since there is no initial registry. Therefore, for the government machinery to process and provide these this kind of a money back so that they can rebuild their lives, or how many fishing nets lost, gets very difficult. And therefore, other mechanisms has to be thought out a priori before these disasters happen. We also had the National Disaster Management Authority created, I think, about 25 years back or 20 years back, soon after many of these calamities happened, including the Bhuj earthquake that you mentioned. But I think their role needs to be expanded. They seem to be focused on simply providing perhaps a soldier-like ability to get in and maybe fix the bridges and so on.
Okay.
But the entire cycle of getting the survivors out and providing them with a livelihood, taking care of their mental health, psychological health, physical health, ensuring there is no outbreak of cholera and other kinds of diseases. All of that should be part of the NDMA's expanded responsibility.
Okay.
And I did not see NDMA in action in this particular mayhem that happened.
Okay. Jayajit, I want to ask you a slightly larger question as well before I come back to the good doctor. Now, for people who are watching this broadcast, ladies and gentlemen, Kerala tourism is an important part of its economics. Okay. Now, of the most popular places to visit in Kerala, Ernakulam, of course, is right at the top. Idukki, then of course the capital Thiruvananthapuram. But Wayanad has been a major tourist destination. It's a hilly region, as we've discovered from the landslides, that is favored by people. 13 lakh people visited Wayanad last year as tourists, and they would have, of course, then brought in livelihoods to tens of thousands of locals. So, Jayajit, what is the knowledge base that we have in a region recovering from a major natural disaster like this, not just a couple of villages?
So, frankly, very limited, in spite of all the digital India that we have done, and in spite of all the history of 75 years of getting census and statistics and so on and so forth. When it comes down to brass tacks and actionable information, it still stays very low. For example, we still don't know how many people were living in Wayanad, for that matter. We don't know how many hotels were there, how many Airbnbs, bread and breakfast were there. So the information that is available is always sketchy, and that is, unacceptable in today's day and world. Also, I think larger questions would be in terms of how did this whole area spring up? As many of the experts are saying, the nature is just finding its way through. It's was supposed to be a river, and it will convert back into a river, which is why the landslide happened. And if you look at the satellite pictures and the aerial pictures, it does look like a river. And the amount of earth that has got washed out, and you mentioned it's about 4-story high, 40 feet in that sense. That's an enormous amount of earth that has been moved out. So how did we allow such a large calamity to build up over a period of time? This did not happen overnight. So there are, a lot of in-depth questions that come out, and it's getting replicated across not just, Wayanad, but also the hilly areas. In fact, these questions first came out in the hilly areas and then in Kerala and other places.
Okay, so we have to have the ecological conversations and developmental conversations for sure. But I just want to give people a context. Now, I want you to think about 350 families that have now faced loss, potentially 600 people we could lose by the end of a calculation. Maybe a certain number, we will not know the exact figure ever. We have to face the compounded tragedy that certain human remains may never be recovered. We have to now deal with the people who are displaced, and the last estimate says that up to 10,000 people are displaced as we speak. I am positing that given the importance of this district to tourism potential and people coming in, 13 lakh people last year, that's 130,000 people visited Wayanad in the scope of last year, that a lot of local workforce was employed in visitor-related activities, tourism-related activities which have gotten affected. I have one more technical question, Jayjeet, before I go back to my other guests. Now, is there a mechanism available to us of insurance that people can go out and actually have a mechanism that they can take out insurance? Because in many normal insurance policies, force majeure applies. An act of God happened, a tragedy happened, and the insurance lapses.
In fact, the force majeure clauses have been accentuated post-COVID. So, the clauses have now come in that cases like COVID and some such cases, including earthquake and so on and so forth, will not be covered under insurance. And now there are separate insurances which are coming in for such force majeure, including riots for that matter, and they're pretty expensive. So the question really is that should we have an Ayushman Bharat kind of an insurance for such cases? Because we need to be also mindful of the fact that if such cases come up for an insurance company, it'll bankrupt the insurance company, because at such large scale, they will not be able to fund it. And so they need to have reinsurers in the back end and so on and so forth. In spite of all the insurance, industry being there, these are very, very large losses. I mean, we could have easily lost much more than the losses that we had right now. So, the answer to your question really is that we don't have such insurances in the manner that we need it. And to do it is a humongous task for the insurance industry on its own. And therefore, the government and the insurance industry really has to get together to provide this insurance for those who have lost their houses, their lives, and so on.
Okay.
And it's going to be a long task to do that.
Okay. Dr. Rao, what becomes now the secondary? And the reason I say secondary is because we are 6 days later, and the chances of finding survivors is now bleak. So then what becomes the secondary medical priority?
Secondary medical priorities are one, there are many people who are injured, and some they need to be rehabilitated. There are psychological issues also to be taken care of. And those who have, there was this incident of 4 children being found in a cave.
Yes.
And we don't know if the parents are alive or not. Why? It seems the mother of one of the children is alive. Whatever. So you will have many people who have lost their family members, especially children, who need to be then taken care of. Then someone has to take care of them. So people who are injured, people who are shell-shocked, and have psychological problems, people who have lost their family members and don't know what to do, how to go about it, especially children. Those who are handicapped before the landslide and now who are without anyone to take care of them. These are all issues that have to be taken care of, other than their rehabilitation financially and professionally that Dr. spoke about. So these are all issues we have to take care of, and it's a huge population. Actually, the unique geology of the Wayanad district and the neighboring Coorg district in Karnataka and the Coimbatore area in Tamil Nadu have always been very landslide prone. So if you are talking about insurance or you are talking about other things, there have to be special measures for this particular area, because this is the landslide prone area, second only to the Himalayas, because these are steep mountains in this particular area, and there is a lot of eroded topsoil on these areas.
Okay.
And these areas have been prone to conversion into coffee estate, tea estate, rubber, and of recently even rubber and cocoa. So there has been a lot of destabilization of that area. Plus, like you said, because of increased tourism, there are a lot of hotels and other construction which has come up in these steep mountainous areas. You see, the local population tends to live near the valley, whereas the tourists tend to live on the hilltops. Now, that is where has led to further destabilization of this.
Okay, I want to put some caveats out there. Ladies and gentlemen, landslides can take place where there has been no human intervention as well. Okay, so the scale and the causation, we'll have to take care, but it takes not a great deal of logical leap of imagination to say that human intervention that causes degradation of the soil, that rips apart forests, makes landslides more prone. So now let me get Chinmaya back into this. Chinmaya, in my living memory, almost every year, we see landslides in Uttarakhand, in Himachal Pradesh. As we speak, 9 people died yesterday in Himachal. 100 plus roads are now closed. I recently returned from Himachal, and the national highways there are all blocked because there are landslides pretty much every 100 meters. In Uttarakhand, as we are speaking, there is something called one of the yatras that is taking place. There have been landslides there. People have been cut off. They are being airlifted. So this is we've been watching this happen for a long time. I'm sure you remember the Kedarnath landslide that happened, in which the Kedarnath temple was nearly damaged. Was it a shock to the system to see this happening in Wayanad?
So Kerala structurally, if you consider, any slope on the ground that is more than 20 degrees is landslide prone. And Kerala structurally has more than 50% of places which are landslide prone. So, and then there's an influx of tourism, the places you mentioned in Uttarakhand and Kedarnath, and again in Kerala. There are lakhs of tourists coming every year, so they need accommodation, they need good places to stay. The economy also gets boosted up, so the locals also keep building multi-story buildings, etc. over there. So that also impacts and pushes great pressure on the weight and on the land. If there are multi-story buildings built atop hills, which Kerala is quite a hilly area in some cases. So all of that exerts a lot of pressure on the land, which then becomes even more prone than it earlier was to landslide. And at least to contain that, there has to be some good initiative on structural engineering, which has to be done. The foundations have to be made much stronger. The deforestation that has been happening due to tourism and due to many other reasons, that also has to be contained. So
okay, so we are in a major conundrum, and the conundrum, ladies and gentlemen, is the conundrum is perennial. It is serious. It has been there all my life. It will be there through all your lives. How do we find the balance? So let me then throw it to Jayjeet Bhattacharya. Jayjeet, today if you go to Alapi, you can barely move in the backwaters because of the number of houseboats there. And that's good news for the local economy. They want people to come. People not just people from India, people from all over the world go to these places to travel in the backwaters. There are all the boats there. They are not electric boats. They're all diesel engines. that are pumping smoke there. And at the same time, we are seeing the hilly areas which are seeing a tourist boom, therefore a construction boom. Now, that's excellent news for the economy. Obviously, all this thing requires licensing, but we don't want to make the licensing so impossible that people can't earn livelihoods. What do we learn from this in terms of the balancing act we need to find?
The word really is responsible tourism that's coming up. We have these mechanisms in Bhutan now. Increasingly, these mechanisms are coming up in European cities where the concept of responsible tourism is coming in, where you cannot have over-tourism. Clearly, the over-tourism is impacting not just the environment, but also the lives of those who are not involved in tourism in those areas, because it's, there are tourists all over the place, peeping into their houses, peeping into their, the things that they hold dear to themselves, and invading their privacy. So there are ways and means to control how much of tourists come in. Those checks can be put at the airports. Those checks can be put in at the railway stations, and one can have that balance in place. Also, the number of boats that are allowed. Clearly, there is a license, and we need to be mindful of how many licenses we issue. Similarly, how many bread and breakfasts are allowed. When the Commonwealth Games happened in 2010, there was a licensing process for the bread and breakfast that was being set up at that point in time. Somehow, in between, we forgot about all of this, and we have got B&Bs popping up all over the place, which are fueled by the online platforms. But there was licensing that was given so that, if there is a terrorist staying within the B&Bs, then that can be taken care of. That can be monitored. So it's not just about over tourism. It's also about safety, security. And as we saw today, in the Wayanad case, we don't even know how many tourists got wiped out. So just to have a full visibility and a tactical visibility, if I can use the military parlance, it is important to have a check and balance, and to have a register in whichever form of who all are existing in that place at any point in time.
Yes.
So that proper actions can be taken, and we limit the amount of tourism that happens in an ecologically sensitive area.
Okay, let's touch base with Anand, my colleague, who's been there on the ground for the past several days, tracking what has now turned into a rehabilitation and recovery operation, not necessarily a rescue operation. Anand, we've been speaking all morning. What's the situation on the ground at this hour?
Yeah, Rishabh, look, today the weather is a bit better than what it was in last 3-4 days. That it has not rained since morning, and now the army personnel and NDRF people, they have gone inside into the debris in several areas. They have split the team into 6 zones, and they are working round the clock to expedite the process of looking for the survivors or the bodies that are buried inside the rubbles and the mud slides that are happened over there. And so the team is now working continuously. They are also using the sniffer dogs to identify where the people's bodies are still buried. And one of the team has also been informed that they are looking for the bodies downstream, that a river that flows to Mallapuram over there. And there are several divers of the Coast Guard and Kerala Fire and Rescue Department, even as of that of Indian Navy. So all these efforts are being made to look out at the number of bodies that are still missing, as more than 240 people are still missing over here in Wayanad, and even as the death toll has reached 355. And looking at the condition of the today's weather, the army and other personals, they are happy that now the rescue operations, which earlier used to be called off around 4 p.m., now it can go by 5:30 in the evening, giving them 1.5 hours more to look for the bodies that are still believed to be inside those rubbles, that debris that is still lying in large section of the 3 villages. And it is worth to mention, Rishabh, that over 86,000 square meter of the land has been completely wiped off due to this massive landslide that occurred over here. Yesterday we shown the pictures of the ground top from where the landslide happened, and from that portion till Chooralmala, around 86,000 square meters of land had been completely cut off from the hill. Back to you.
The maths in this, ladies and gentlemen, mind-boggling. If you're talking about 10, 20 feet of rubble across 86,000 square meters, you're talking about literally millions of cubic feet of earth. You're talking about millions of tons of earth, which will have to be removed. And at least in the immediate or medium term, the people who've been rescued, they're not going to be able to return. So, Dr. Rao, quick thought on one other aspect of this, because the collector spoke about it this morning. People are arriving out of curiosity to take selfies because it's in the news and it's the biggest thing happening in that part of the region. It's a very odd situation, and she's asked people not to just show up because it's complicating the situation. Why would people want to do that?
I guess see, after the social media has come up, there are a lot of people who are willing to do anything to get more followers and more viewers. This is the tragedy. And you are well aware of how many people have lost their lives trying to take selfies in dangerous locations. And this is trying to get more viewership and more people to see what is going on just because it is in the news. This is sad, because what they are doing is they are congesting the roads, the few roads or few accesses that there is for the rescue people. They are blocking them. They are also making demands on whatever little drinking water and food is available. So they are actually becoming a hindrance. Even politicians visiting and not doing anything more than just going and visiting. So both tourists or any other curious people are actually adding to the problem. If you are going there as a volunteer to help in the rescue,
please do.
Then please do.
Yeah.
But if you are just going there to think that it is some fun to watch, please stay away.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.